Before I start this, I would like to preface that this is meant to be a constructive breakdown of the state of the game, because I really want this game to be good, and I felt like I should make a video kind of bringing some of the issues to light, so that the game can have those issues addressed, and it can be the best version of itself. So, for Five Nights at Freddy's 10th anniversary, they had scheduled a bunch of games to come out during the anniversary, and one of those games that was listed on there was 5 Laps at Freddy's. And I'm a huge kart racer fan. Some of my favorites are Mario Kart DS, CTR, Nitro Fueled, and Speed Punks. So I've played a fair bit of them. I've played some of the worst ones, and I've played some of the better ones. In my head, I was thinking, oh, this is going to be the kart racer of my dreams. No microtransactions, no stupid series limits, a good online, animatronics and karts. This is going to be awesome. And I couldn't wait to see the game in action, but once I finally saw the game in action, I was very, very skeptical that the game was going to turn out sloppy. It kind of looked like a mobile game, but I wanted to wait for the demo to come out, and I wanted to have an unbiased opinion on it. So I waited, and I didn't watch any videos on the game. I downloaded it, and I started it up for myself, just to see if the gameplay is still good. But I'll get to that. Some of the first issues that I had was how the game ran. As soon as I booted it up, the music was chopping in and out, the game was running really, really bad, and it crashed a few times. Even later on when I played the game, it would just randomly crash if I interacted with a certain object, or I guess if I hit a turbo pad, or if the level was changing, it just would crash. And it took so long for the game to load a lot of times that eventually I just gave up playing the game after a certain time because it was getting so annoying. The menus did not work. UI would just sometimes appear and sometimes disappear, and it really had no consistency. And even for the tracks, they would just disappear and reappear, background would be there, sometimes you would see the skybox, sometimes the models would load and it would zoom in on the model, but then the model would disappear as soon as it's fully zoomed in. It kind of made no sense. And once you get into a race, you can actually change your settings to higher settings, and then the game will run fine. Like, I have a pretty decent PC. I can run most games now at either medium or low graphics, but I could not run that game. And I really should be able to run that game because it's not very graphically intensive. Usually for games, it's the other way around, where the game runs bad in the gameplay, but then it runs really good in the menu. It's kind of weird to see it be vice versa. And the game does not have correct custom controls support, because I tried setting my buttons to basically be more like Mario Kart, and it would just double layer the button inputs. It would be like turbo and rear view, or it would be like turbo and drive, and it would just not work correctly. Next were the models. The game definitely looks like an Unreal 4 game, and a lot of the environments don't look that good. They kind of look like asset packs. Same thing with the character models, they do not look that good. Even in this demo, only some of them are animated, and even if they are animated, they're extremely stiff posed. The style for them is really not the best. The character art on the sides looks pretty good for the portraits when you're actually racing, but the models do not look that good. In my opinion, they should have just used the FNAF World models. That's kind of always what I saw the series would be if it was a kart racer. And a lot of the effects in the game do not look that good either. The smoke and the sparks seem to be somehow like attached to the character or the kart, so they just like jaggedly move with it instead of flowing in the wind. Out of the 3, I think Midnight Motorist is probably the best looking one, but even then, it feels like a very face level adaptation of the source, and the sinkhole is actually unplayable. Like, even the CPUs think so. There's a part in the sinkhole where if you take a certain shortcut, you're just not allowed to play the race anymore. If you jump off of here, it'll just keep respawning you back at the same point over and over and over again. And eventually, if you keep doing it long enough, it'll just lock you at the center of the racetrack and keep respawning you over and over and over. It literally started to feel like a creepypasta. Now for the items. The items are hard to judge because the CPUs barely ever used them, and there was just never enough racers near each other at a time for me to actually get a sense of using them. I tripped on the butter a couple times, I hit the Phaz Blaster, the rocket is way too slow, and the bomb, for some reason, when you throw it, it goes right in your trajectory of driving, timed perfectly to land where you're about to drive, and it instantly explodes, basically like it was meant for you. And I know that the bombs are from FNAF World, but it took me till I played 5 Laps at Freddy's to realize that those bombs look just like the ones from Pac-Man World Rally. They look pretty similar. Now for the music, honestly it feels right at home with FNAF. It definitely feels like Mario Kart inspired FNAF music. It just, I don't know, I like it personally, it definitely fits with the game. And now for the gameplay. The turning does not feel very good, and a lot of the time it just feels useless without drifting. Backing up is way harder than it needs to be, because when you hit a wall and try to back up, since the turning speed is so awful, you need to have a lot of space behind you, and if another kart racer gets behind you, you're basically just stuck. Now for the drifting feels okay once you're actually initiated and you're actually drifting, but how you initiate the drift feels terrible. There's no animation to it, there's no flair to it at all, your character just turns and you're in the drift. The game needs to add some sort of tire streaks or smoke, or even have the car do a little squash and stretch bounce. Or the kart can even jump like when you do a drift in Mario Kart, but the game needs something because drifting does not feel good. And unless you're using Afton's car, the drifting feels terrible. The drifting feels like you're losing speed the longer you hold it, but you're supposed to hold it so that you can get a higher speed boost after. But the boost that you get after just does not feel worth it at all. And it's kind of funny too because the Cupcake kart has more balanced stats than the actual standard kart. The jumping doesn't feel good, and it looks the worst out of all the movement. I believe it's only used for 2 shortcuts, but they should really just map the jump button to the drift button like Mario Kart and CTR so you have to time your jumps. I don't feel like it really needs to be a whole separate button unless they plan on doing something different with it. I guess you could say a good time for it is on the Midnight Motorist stage, but even then, you're just using it to dodge cars. The turbo feels good, and the way you get turbo is pretty neat. You have to get all the little blue battery packs that you see in the level, and it feels pretty good to use the turbo and collect them. There's a bug with landing in the game, where when you go off of a ramp, you land on the ground, but instead of continuing, you'll bounce, and it'll halt all your speed to basically 0, and then after you land from that second bounce, it'll give you all of that speed back. It just feels very clunky. Slopes have very weird properties. You'll randomly gain and lose speed when you go at certain angles on the slopes, and the game has some anti-gravity parts of the track where you have to drive at a 90-degree angle, or you have to go through a complete loop, but the physics in the camera cannot handle it. The gravitational parts don't even really add anything to the game, and I think that they should just be removed. In one segment of the level, the gravity actually tried pulling me to the wall underneath it, which eventually I used to my advantage to absolutely break the level. The CPUs don't really work at all. The computer players can barely stay on the tracks. The rubber banding is painfully obvious, and as mentioned before, the items barely show up. And it really wouldn't be an issue with the CPUs, but there's no local multiplayer, and I thought if the demo was coming out now that there would be online, and that would be a perfect advantage for them to test it. Another issue with the game is going off of the track. When you go off the track, the game will overlay a black screen with a countdown that tells you you're out of bounds, and then it'll teleport you back in, but more often than not, you'll graze the out-of-bounds area, and then the game will start flashing that screen in front of you, which really doesn't feel good on the eyes. And lastly, the game doesn't tell you anything. The day and nighttime mechanic look cool for how the level changes, but doesn't really explain if it actually affects any gameplay, neither does the game explain anything at all. Now, instead of just listing problems, I've written some solutions for a lot of the issues that I've presented. The first thing is, I don't think the characters are really going to change. I feel like they're going to keep this style because they've already established it, unless they get a lot of pushback. One thing is, at least the models need to look a little nicer and be a bit more expressive, because even the ones that are animated aren't really animated a whole lot. And for the control of the cart, I feel like it really needs some better particles. It needs to have some more animation tweening, like it needs to be smoother when it goes into certain animations, and it needs to have some squash and stretch. Maybe they can add some like bounciness to the game if they're gonna make the characters look this cartoonish. A solution for the CPUs is maybe they need to just be given a solid track point that they will not deviate from too heavily, because as long as the game has good online or at least some local multiplayer support, it's a lot easier to ignore rubber banding on CPUs when you're playing with a friend. But when it's just playing it by yourself, it's painfully obvious. And to deal with when you go off the track, maybe just add like a vignette filter or like a static filter that slowly fades in and not immediately showing you the screen that says that you're out of bounds. Other than that, I would like to list off some of the positive things so that this video isn't just all negative. I do like the cart designs. The carts look pretty nice. The kind of idea they have for what they want to do with the stages is nice. I just really want them to have the stages feel a little bit more alive instead of just going on for a long time, because those stages could get cut shorter and have more things in them, and they would be amazing. They would look great. Another thing I like is the character icons, having the character icons be animated and they kind of look like they're in that like Crash Bandicoot style. It looks really nice, and so do the item icons. Those item icons look pretty nice. The day and nighttime mechanic do look really cool for a lot of the levels. I really like the blood rain and the sky and how everything looks all pixelated. It does look really nice for the game. Now, I know that this is just a demo and the game has probably more than a year before it actually comes out, but I do want to say these things so that the game can be the best version of itself, because I love kart racers, I love FNAF, I just want to see this game be good. I'm only really seeing people bring up issues on forums because there's no reviews for the game. There's only the curator reviews, which I have a couple screenshots right here. I just want to make sure that Click Team gets the right feedback and that they're able to make this game great. Thanks for watching.